There comes a time in every person's life when you realise it's not about doing what you are told, but doing what you know is right for you. Let us take a journey of learning and discovery with the world's most successful people who are living the life of their dreams, walking through life using their inner wisdom and being of service to others. Forget exams, grades and test scores. What is your purpose? As we let go of what we think should be and learn from our elders to gain knowledge, inspiration and a true sense of who we are. What are your dreams? Does your life have meaning? Are you living a life of significance? Let's talk with today's guest.
Hello, my name is Mark Taylor and welcome as we spend some more time together on the Learning on Fire podcast. Today I'm talking to Sadaf Raza. Hi Sadaf, thanks for joining me and let's explore the journey of who you are.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you for having me on your show.
So, can you give us a bit of background about where you're living and the sorts of things that you're into at the moment?
Sure. So, I live in London. I am the founder and CEO of Early MBA, a company committed to empowering teenagers through short courses that enable them to experience and learn from expert life lessons.
And is this something that they do online or is it an in-person kind of course? How does it work?
It's in person, so it's run either in school holidays or after school. And we have students from different schools teamed up to do different challenges. And typically the after school course would be once a week for 2 hours. And the holiday course is immersive for a week.
Fantastic. And what was it that drove you to create such a thing?
I think it's really the insight that a lot of the things that I think helped me in getting selected or that helped a lot of people on our advisory board that are all, people from Ivy League universities who work for the likes of, Google and Goldman Sachs. They say that they were things that weren't taught in school curriculums, but they were things that they learned either the hard way or through early mentors in their organizations or, father's friend who guided them. And I felt those things should really be, taught in an interesting and stimulating way to everyone versus, the few that have access to those sort of advice and information. And so the idea was to put a proprietary curriculum together, which took us 2 years to get right. But it's really age appropriate for teenagers and teaching them the things that will hopefully, really make a difference to their success and their happiness.
I mean, that's perfect. And that is so exactly what this podcast is all about, the important learning things that are so essential really to everybody, especially teenagers as they're growing up, but not necessarily things that happen day to day in schools or part of the main curriculum. And I think that sort of combination just works so well. And like I say, if you haven't got a mentor, you don't have that opportunity. These like I say, this opportunity is really invaluable. Absolutely.
And I think, people, at least I did, spend so long figuring out what, course to study at university. And I sort of think back and it was such little information that you were working towards. And I think that as you become older and you want to, you realize you want to do something different, transitioning can often be quite hard. Sometimes people can box you in, which they really shouldn't, but it does happen. And the idea is really if you can spend a little bit of time, at this age group before you have to make all these important decisions about, university, your first career, what you want to really explore further, then you can sort of just get off on a better start, and hopefully it sets you up for making that journey in a more in a smoother way.
Yeah, no, I can really understand that. So let's go back and listen to some of your journey as we talk about our sort of schooling and education as well. And what does your life look like now, and how is it different from when you're growing up? And I guess that can be location or environment or just your education background, really.
Yes, it's quite different. So today, I'm working on a fast-growing venture where we help teenagers. We're based in London and we're based in Dubai. And it's really all about, discovering and maximizing your potential. Whereas I grew up in Lahore in Pakistan, where just the fact that, my parents made sure my sisters and I had an education at all, made them progressives. So it's I guess it's a result of, my early childhood that has made me want to make more opportunities available to people who, like me, might not have had them at that age.
And I always love it when I hear that complete contrast of what people's early years experience in life compared to where they are now. Because I think for everybody listening, if you feel like you're slightly either confined by your circumstances or you can't imagine your world being any different, then to hear people who've, they're now living in a different country or their whole way of life is different, I think just gives you a bit of empowerment that actually anything's possible and you actually do have that opportunity for change, even if you don't quite know how that's going to pan out.
Absolutely. I always tell people that you have to aim big. We start off with just options that are available in front of us or whatever the next step we think we can do. But I think it's more important to think the other way around and sort of where do you want to be? No matter if you don't know how to get there, you kind of have to start with the destination first and then figure out, okay, how do I make my way there in many different steps.
Exactly, and often it's that allowing those steps to materialize in front of you, isn't it? Because I think when you've got that bigger picture of where you want to head towards, you meet the right person, you have the right conversation, you come across the right podcast or the right book, and then all of a sudden your journey almost just sort of opens up in front of you, I think.
Absolutely. And this is, also what we cover in the Early MBA program. I mean, we have topics such as networking, for instance, which I think, nobody actually teaches you and often has a negative connotation, but it's really about, making the most of those opportunities when they arise and, how to do it in an authentic way and how to sort of start building it early on when there's nothing really you need from anyone. And then being able to sort of tap onto those relationships as and when you need some advice or you need some direction. So, it's quite important for a lot of these things, if you just develop good skills early on, they just become second nature. And I think that's what I think is, the most helpful thing about the program.
Yeah, no, it sounds absolutely fantastic. And I think even just that idea of being able to speak to people, especially if you're a shy person or going out of your comfort zone, I mean, just that initial skill is just invaluable as well. So, yeah, no, I think it's absolutely fantastic. What was valuable about your school experience?
So I went to a leading all-girls school called the Lahore Grammar School. And what I loved about it was that it placed a lot of emphasis on extracurricular activities. And those are still my fondest memories. I did a lot of netball and French club and debating. And I know you just mentioned something about being shy. I myself was an extremely shy little girl, and I had the ambition to better myself. And I joined the school debating club, and I, regularly attended their sessions on Saturday mornings. And I remember the day I went on to win the national debating championships, and I won an award for being, the best speaker in the country. And I just knew that journey that I had made from being so shy myself, and it made me realize that actually you can do anything. You just have to sort of, visualize what it is that you want to achieve for yourself. And I think that was definitely my most valuable school experience. Nothing to do with the academic education itself, but this, overcoming of a challenge and the development of such a useful, transferable skill that has stayed with me, since that time.
And certainly hearing, people that have actually experienced exactly the kind of transformation, like you say, if you know what it's like to feel shy, to not quite sure where to put yourself in your school surroundings, to have then hear someone who's actually, like say, gone on, you put yourself in the debating team, and then let alone to go on to win a national award, which is amazing. And so I can really start to picture how this program of yours is so passionate for you, obviously, and actually how the real benefits of what people taking part can actually get from it. I think that's really, really important. And like I said, from that kind of experience standpoint, which I think is often key for people wanting to get involved in something, they want to hear it and see it from people who've actually been there and done it. And I think that's a really key step. Which teachers do you remember and why?
I guess the first teacher that comes to mind is my A-level economics teacher. He was young. He had just graduated from an Ivy League university, and his approach to teaching was quite different. He used to replace the examples in the book with more local examples, and he often made things more centric to the interest of teenage girls. I mean, I still remember the scarcity of resources example that used shoes and bags versus Guns and Roses, and it made me laugh, but it also caught our attention and drove the point home, which I think is really important. I mean, learning should be fun and engaging, and you shouldn't quite realize that you're learning such important things because you're just, enjoying the experience, but you take away the learning as a result from it.
I think definitely when you have that kind of real life and when it's actually, something which is integral to how you're living your life at the moment, because it's then much more understandable, isn't it? It's something you can relate to in a really straightforward way.
Exactly. And just also catching your attention and keeping you engaged throughout the class. I think, at least for me, a lot of my teachers didn't quite do that. And the ones who did, that's when you really paid attention and you wanted to learn and you sort of, developed this, passion for being a lifelong learner. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I think as a student, when you understand that difference between having to be in school and doing what you have to do, and and actually then realizing, but there's something out there that I'm really interested in or something I want to know more about, and now I understand the difference between the feeling of that kind of passion and also just the having to. I think then you suddenly realize that actually learning and education is actually only up to you, and you can take that in whichever direction you want to, even if you are still within the school system.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember when I did my MBA program at INSEAD, one of the things that they have is a grade non-disclosure policy. So, all your life you're sort of studying to get the grades, but there they sort of take away that pressure and they say, just come here and, take courses on topics you're interested in that you've never done before, that you probably won't score well in. But this is your, opportunity to experience it and try it for yourself. And I think that was such a nice safety net to go on and then, learn about different topics. And I think that's when you really sort of think about, what is it that I'm curious about and what is it that I want to learn versus sort of, like you said, sometimes in school we feel all these things we just have to do. And that takes away some of that, joy of curiosity and choice of learning.
Absolutely. I heard a podcast the other day about some people who were homeschooling, and it really struck me as a parent, actually, because they were saying some of their children, they'd suddenly be into something so passionately, but only for a short period of time. They'd spend like 3 months really interested in coding, and you think, oh right, you can see their future and they're really passionate about this, and this is where they're heading. But then 3 months would go by, and then the next thing they wanted to do was sewing. And it's just when you've got that freedom to just explore, some of these things have a shelf life in some ways, that you look into them and you get so much out of them in ways that you don't even necessarily know at the time. But it's only having that sort of diverse experience of learning and exploring lots of different things that you then find maybe the thing that really does light your fire from sort of here on in as you start to take it towards a career.
Absolutely. And I think it's sort of a cumulative effect. You're putting sort of layers on top of the different experiences, because having had one experience, you look at the next ones or the next topic slightly differently. And so it doesn't need to be sort of a straight path of, just, coding all the way through to expert coding. It sort of has to be this, all this other perspective that comes into your education. And then you can really sort of discover from there where you want to go next based on what you know at that point in time.
Yeah, no, I think that's really true, really, really true, and very insightful and great to hear when people are thinking, I need to have a path. Just you don't need to have a path. You need to explore everything and then just see where it takes you, a little bit like we were saying earlier on. I think that's great advice. Who did you admire when you were young, and what was it about that person that had such an impact?
I think it's so important for young people to have inspirational role models. I can think of many people I admire today, but if I think back at that age, I don't think any one person comes to mind. I recall I just wanted a career that had, my own desk in an office with air conditioning. I mean, summers in Pakistan are terribly hot. So this is one of the reasons, I guess, I launched Early MBA, to give high school students access to leading professionals so that they can learn from the best and truly understand what different professions are about, and especially aspirational sounding careers. I mean, what do those people actually do on a day-to-day basis? And I think that's why sort of, my interest in sort of developing this program was there, so that now in the program we have people come and spend one-to-one time with students, coaching them and speaking about, their life lessons and what helped them. And I think it's really important to have that at a young age, because that's when you learn to dream bigger and aim bigger and, explore bigger. And that's really important.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true. And I think, like I say, that again, it's experience, isn't it, in having access to these people. And it sounds like your program is really sort of opening that door for people to really meet these people and understand them. And like we were saying before, that sort of idea of networking, even if it's just that kind of introduction to begin with, is a really key factor.
Exactly. I mean, I meet young, teenagers who sort of, when you ask them what they want to do, and they say, I want to be a banker. And then you ask them why, and they, it just sounds good to them. They don't really know. And then you sort of ask them, do you know anybody who's a banker? And they say, yes, I've met one person. And then you're like, what did you ask them? And, they just don't even know what to ask them. It's that, the initial conversation about, after the program, at least they know next time, they meet somebody, they will be able to at least engage with them in a meaningful conversation where they will learn from that experience. And I think that's the little steps that they can take to then do little work experiences and just, piece together a better picture of whatever industry they're interested in. And I think if you don't have that confidence and you don't have just an insight into the different roles and, how the little pieces fit together, you're just too shy to even, start asking those questions. And it's very important to ask those questions.
Yes, and especially when you don't actually necessarily even know, or that you wouldn't even necessarily know what the job entails, isn't it? Because like you say, yes, I want to be a banker, or I want to be a doctor, or I don't know, I want to be a professional footballer, whatever it happens to be. It's actually also starting to understand and develop, but what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Do I want to be commuting? Do I want to live in a city? Do I want to spend X amount of time doing whatever it happens to be? And it's only as you start to talk to people that you really understand the full effect of what that particular area is all about, and you can't know that until you ask those questions, which I guess is key.
Absolutely. I mean, the amount of young people just want to travel as part of their work, and then I have friends who travel all the time who are consultants, and that's what they hate about the job, is that they travel so much, and it's not the holiday on the beach that students imagine it to be. And so it's really interesting to, like you said, to have that perspective of what does it really involve versus what does it sound like it involves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly as a musician, I have that understanding. When you're on a concert platform or you're in an orchestra pit and you're at the height of the climax of the piece that you're working on, it's like, well, this is what you live for. This is your sort of dream and your connection with the world to share your passion. But that's a minute amount of time compared to the lots of time in the car travelling around the country, or even around different countries to do the concerts, or various hotel rooms that you spend a lot of time in and being away from home, or the 10,000 hour idea of the amount of practice and the amount of time you need to have put into got to that stage, and actually seeing the whole thing as a bigger picture. But I think what it does do is it does also make you realise then that sort of the pinnacle of what you're trying to achieve, the rest of it really is worthwhile, because it's part and parcel of what you're doing. But like you say, it's only understanding that bigger picture that you can make those decisions.
I see this with this proprietary business simulation that we have. So students get to be the CEO of their company, and they're sort of competing with each other, and they're selling to each other in the value chain. And I see the excitement of them sort of as they're sort of, doing face-to-face trading, and then they're making all these strategic decisions over 3 years. And then I see them get to the accounts part, and sort of, you see the energy drain off, and you kind of, but it's important to put that piece in there also, because they have to realize that, entrepreneurship is not just about the, making your own decisions and being your own boss. It's actually about making sure every little thing is in the right place, and dealing with the crises that happen during the simulation, the world events, etc. And so I think it's really important to give them that flavor, so their expectations are just more manageable, and then they're kind of like, yes, when the tough part comes, I knew this was going to come too, and this is part and parcel of like you said, this achievement that I'm trying to really work towards, and this is going to make it worth it. But you don't want them to sort of just see the tough part and be like, nobody told me about this, because quite often when you hear people talk about their roles, they talk about the good stuff. They talk about their successes. They talk about, how lucky they were, and, humble things, but they don't really talk about sort of, the grit that was required, or the things that were harder to navigate. And I think it's equally important to talk about those things too.
It's that kind of overnight success, isn't it, that you hear of people being successful, or often you hear it from a pop or sort of a kind of a commercial musician or singer-songwriter, and it's they've just suddenly come from nowhere and they're an overnight success, and then you hear them interviewed and they were like, yes, I was on the road working in bars for 20 people for 10 years.
Absolutely.
and like you say, it's understanding that, and I think that's great. And the other thing I really liked about what you said was that sort of both sides of the coin is the fact that you can let people know that sort of bigger picture and how all these things fit together, and that there are different types of the business, and some things are easier to navigate than others, and some things knowing that, you know, there's going to be problems that you need to do. But at the same time, you can't also give that person the actual experience of doing it. You only get that from actually going through it yourself. So I think understanding both sides of that, I think, is probably a really great education experience that you often don't hear people talk about, which I think is absolutely vital.
Exactly. And the word experience you use, I think, is really important, because just that memory of when it happened to you is a learning that you will remember in a far greater impact than just somebody telling you that you should do it this way or that way. And so, you know, with the program, we've made sure that there's hardly any time of us telling them, you know, in terms of lecture. We sort of introduce a topic and then it's like, okay, go ahead and do it. And because it's a safe environment, you know, make tons of mistakes. It's completely okay. You can sort of overcome them. But the learning from that, you will always remember much more than if you sort of just had information about, you know, what's the right thing and what's not the best thing. And I think that's what, you know, I see the teenagers really take away from the experience, is that just that flavor of experience that they're dying to get at this age also, that, you know, they're just a bit shy of getting of the real world. And I think that's certainly experience stands for a lot.
And I really love that idea of the safe environment, because I think that's so key, which I think is part of the problem that teenagers find these days, is that everything's literally hinges on me doing my GCSEs or my A levels. It's like I've only got this one opportunity to ever, you know, succeed or fail, or that's the perception, even though in reality, of course, that's not true. But I think having that safe environment where you can make mistakes, where you're encouraged to just explore, like we were talking about before, and also that we know that we can give them a soft landing. So we, you know, even in the slightly sort of bigger picture of actually learning to live in the real world, you know, that as parents, as teachers, as organisations, you know, we allow them to explore, but we know that there's a soft landing if they make a mistake, and from that learning experience nothing's happened which is absolutely disastrous, but the actual learning experience they've got they'll just thrive, and like you say, from that learning experience from here on in.
Exactly. And also I think, you know, to add to that, we like to spell out a bit of the cause and effect, because sometimes, you know, in real life, you try 5 things and, you know, something works. You don't quite know sometimes what was it that sort of caused that. And so what we try to do is a quick resume every time they have that soft landing, to sort of make them realize, you know, what was it that did work and didn't work. And I think that recap is also something that in the real world we don't, you know, always do. But I think it's important to do. So we sort of, you know, build in that process within the program, so they sort of develop those good habits.
And what was the best piece of advice you've ever been given, and who gave it to you?
Interestingly, it was from the current Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, who gave it to me back in 1992, when he was just a cricketer at the time, and he had recently led his team to win the World Cup. And I remember he wrote it for me. He told me it's his motto, and he wrote it next to his autograph in this tiny diary that I discovered in a safekeeping box in my parents' home this Christmas. And it read, "Nothing is impossible if you are prepared to work for it." And I think there's really something there, because, you know, Imran Khan himself went on to build Asia's largest cancer hospital that treats nearly all its patients for free. And he formed this challenger political party in the country that he eventually led to power. So I think it's obviously worked for him on more than one occasion. And I think there's really something in that motto.
I think it's really good to hear that. And I think also understanding, especially when you're young, that even having the dream, having the understanding, having the desire and the passion was something, there is also the fact that you need to also put some work in to get there, because it won't just open up for you without you actually putting that amount of hours in. Again, a little bit like I was saying about being a musician, you know, that 10,000 hour rule. It's only having done it over and over and over and practice the skills that you need. And those skills are obviously different for everything that you do, but it doesn't just happen just because you want to. There's that work that has to go involved in that cause and effect that comes from that.
You know, when you're younger, like every, you know, few months, a year seems like forever. But actually, when you sort of, with hindsight, you realize it wasn't that long, you know, a time, and you really do have to commit to something for a long period and see it through. And that's what's important, to sort of, you know, spend a little bit of time deciding on what you are, you know, wanting to aim for and commit to, and then stick with it till you find a way to get there.
And what advice would you give your younger self now?
I think many people make this mistake, and I certainly did. I thought that if I only just get, a first in my degree, or if only I get this, coveted job, then I've made it. And I think this is what you were also alluding to earlier. The truth is that we all have to commit to becoming lifelong learners, and we have to constantly think critically and challenge ourselves to take our life to where we want it to be. So our degree or our first job is only a stepping stone. And I think young adults tend to sort of, put too much pressure on themselves and sort of just think that that's their aim, whereas really that's actually still quite a short-term view of the world. And really, the whole life journey is actually quite a long one that's going to, have many steps in it. And so I think I would, definitely tell myself that if I was speaking to my younger self today.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. And it definitely is that, like you said, it takes the pressure away, doesn't it? Because it's like, right, okay, this is now, and then I move on to the next thing, and I'm going to learn some more, and I've learned from what I've experienced, and now I'm going to put that to good use. And then you're only ever winning, because you're either being successful in what you've achieved, or you've learned an awful lot from whatever you've learned from before, what you've tried to put your efforts in before. And so then the next day is positive, because you've got all that experience with you. And I think that just, certainly for me, when I think of it like that, just feels like a very different world to live in and a different body to live in than, like you say, that sense of, as long as I get my first and I get my great job, then everything from there on in will be fine. And of course, we know there's an awful long life, hopefully, for everyone to be living, and that will look different in very different areas of your life and different sections of your life as you go through all the different things that are going to happen to you.
Exactly. And I also think that, in the same way, if you actually were the one who did really well, and then you get complacent, I see that happening also when sort of people feel, that they've just, done it and now they know everything. And you also realize actually once you start working, it's a level playing field. So you did those steps to get there. But now what you're going to be judged on is how you perform on the job today. So it doesn't matter which university you came from or what your previous experiences are. This is what the field is at the moment. And so it gives those people who didn't do so well a good chance, but also the people who did well, they have to also realize that, they need to keep, delivering. They can't sort of just, tick, one or two boxes and think that's it.
And that really sounds what's really great about what you're providing within your projects, because it's that sense of you're learning how to learn, and you're developing the skills that you need for everything that's going to happen to you later on. And then from there, you've always got everything that you need. Like you say, whether you've found it easy so far or whether you've had to work really hard, you actually know how to go about learning. And I certainly say that to my percussion pupils when I'm teaching them. It's that kind of, my job really is to get to the point where you don't need me to be here. If you understand how to learn what to do, then all of a sudden the teacher becomes irrelevant, really. I said, there might be new things you don't know, and then you can ask me those things, or you'd find someone else to do it. But how you go about doing it and the time that you need to put in to do it, you can actually do on yourself. And at that point, then my job is really done.
Absolutely. I think that is the definition of a great teacher. It's all about reversing the classroom, whereas sort of the student takes the initiative to, what they really want to get out of the teacher. Versus the other way around. And, when I think about the world of work, the roles that are going to exist in the future when a lot of these, teenagers start working are not going to be the ones that even exist today. And so you can't sort of, tell them that, this is how you have to get into those roles. It's more about, this is a skill set that you can use no matter what those roles are. You will be able to be successful at them, because these are the, most important skills for the future. And I think that's important, because back in my parents' generation, it was about, you find a career and then sort of you progress down that path. In my generation, I found that people, often changed careers, and that was an expectation. So you kind of have to have the skill set to apply to the next one. What I'm finding in the future is that people, might even have like multiple careers at the same time. So, they could be, have a day job. They could be writers in the evening. They could be doing, something else on the side. And there's so many different, skills and interests that they are sort of bringing about together. And so you really need to have, a combination of skills to be able to apply it in a way that, whatever brings you happiness.
I think that's true, and I guess I'm probably a classic example of that. You know, I sort of have my professional playing career, I have my teaching and education career, and I've now got this podcast network, and actually it's the essence of who I am in the middle of that, which actually brings everything to each of those very different jobs effectively. But actually, I think what you said there is absolutely key, is the fact that you can, in this day and age, in the way that the world is developing, you can actually, as long as you turn up as you can have lots of different ways of expressing yourself in a work form, as it were, like say, rather than it just being a career. And I think that's a very insightful thing for people to really hear and understand. And just going on from that, so what do you think your future looks like?
Oh, very exciting, I hope. We doubled the number of participants in our program from last quarter to this quarter. So we hope to keep growing with this momentum. We're looking to grow our team with more promising talent. So that's always very exciting for me. And we have some unique new courses in development. So I'm really very optimistic for the future.
And what podcast, book, video, film or song or resources had the biggest impact on your life, and why was that?
Have you read the book The Power of Full Engagement?
No, I haven't.
So it was actually assigned reading when I worked at Procter & Gamble, and I think that has had an impact on me till today, because it essentially dispels the myth that high performance is a result of good time management, which most people think it is. And it explains that it's really, in fact, all about better energy management. And it gives a very practical account of how to assess how well you're doing on different, energy frameworks, whether it's mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, and then what steps you can take to improve that. So you have personal renewal as well as high performance. And so I would really recommend it.
I'm definitely going to read that, because that really does resonate with me at the minute. I'm certainly in that position of having lots of things going on and actually realising that in order to sustain all of these things and actually have the energy to grow the things you want to grow, there's a lot more inward looking and a lot more personal looking, rather than just the actual, like you say, that I'm going to do X or I'm going to do Y externally. And I think that's that definitely sort of seemed to ring true for me there.
Great. Well, you must tell me after you read it what you thought of it, and we can have another discussion.
Absolutely, I will do. That'd be fantastic. A great conversation to have. So for those people listening who have really been inspired by what you're saying and might like to get involved, what's the best way for them to contact you and find out more?
So they can visit our website. It's just www.earlymba.co.uk. And it has information about upcoming courses in London, and different partnerships that we run with schools, and they can just drop us a line if they have any question for me. Just address it to me, and I'll be more than happy to reach out back to them.
Lovely. Well, thank you, Sadaf, for sharing your wisdom and allowing us to learn from your wonderful experiences.
Thank you so much, Mark. It was a pleasure speaking to you today.
Thanks for listening to the Learning on Fire podcast. For more information, please visit educationonfire.com and follow the links from the homepage.
This show is sponsored by the National Association for Primary Education.
Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.